Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Captain America Brave New World finally get released, and survey says, yeah, this is the worst opening for a Captain America film in the entire history of the franchise. Whether we are comparing the total domestic numbers adjusted for inflation, right, having an actual apple-to-apples comparison, or if that drives you crazy and you don't like me when I'm using those type of inflationary numbers, even comparing the estimated ticket sales for the domestic opening, and even further comparing this to another film that had a similar result, or at least a similar release schedule over the President's Day weekend in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. This film is failing in every single respect. Now, this does not mean that the film is set to be a massive catastrophic failure because, of course, the massive debate is over how much money did this film actually cost. We'll talk about a bit about what the story is there, give a little background for those that maybe are not quite aware about it and what that ultimately means for the overall take of this movie, or what I think is going to happen, the overall loss for this movie. We also have to keep in mind that this is the opening weekend. This film will have very little competition over the next couple of weeks, and so it has some room to grow. But if we know anything about MCU movies, if we know anything about just the nature and the history of these films, they usually have a much larger opening weekend and then a massive second weekend drop-off. Many of them have been able to make enough worldwide in those opening days, especially those opening weekends, to be able to account for any potential losses in total box office, right? Those drop-offs that you just traditionally see in movies like these. So sometimes they make up for it with that. With these numbers, though, and especially based off of the likely cost of this movie, that is not going to be happening. And this film right now is in a lot of financial trouble and a lot of financial danger to boot, in addition to the film just not really being all that great. The audiences have been pretty clear on this. A mixed bag is, I think, the best case scenario, the best argument that you can make. Critics are definitely much more hateful towards this movie. In fact, there's a lot of similarities that we could really say between this and Quantumania, not only in what we are seeing on screen, not only in the fan reaction, but also in the box office numbers, with this one actually coming in behind that of Quantumania. We also have some other new releases like Paddington in Peru, which is a film I really want to go and see. I think the Paddington films are actually really good family entertainment, family fare, but most of this video is going to be really focused on Brave New World. We'll talk more about Paddington tomorrow on our live stream at 7:45 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll talk about that and a plethora of other topics, but let's just dive right into this bit of news. So first off, Captain America Brave New World, it finally has now been released with only 88.5 million in a total domestic. Now, there was a lot of speculation as far as where this film's number was going to fall. It seemed that the so-called industry experts were saying the film was going to come in around $80 million plus, going into the 3-day with upwards of $95 to $100 million over the 4-day totals. We also warned y'all that they were going to be playing around with those metrics to either use the 4-day total or the 4-day projection as the headline to try to make the film seem like it's doing better than some of the others. There was also the talk about how this film was going to do better on paper than even that total box office for Captain America the Winter Soldier from back in 2014, which was also hilarious that they would even use that as a comparison point, all while the way not adjusting for inflation or taking any other factors into account. So what does it actually mean? How can we actually compare this movie? And again, most of this video is going to be spent on Captain America Brave New World. Well, let's go into some of these numbers. So first, let's talk a bit more about Captain America as a franchise. And so if we go back in time a bit to the first Avenger, these are also all numbers with their budgets included having the numbers adjusted for inflation. What is the value of the dollar today versus what it was back in 2011 and 2014? It is completely unfair to compare a movie that makes $200 million today to a film that would have made upwards of $200 million back in 2011 or 2014, because those dollars have a lot more value in today's world than at any other time. So the value of the dollar today is a lot less so today, which means ultimately, guess what? If you made $20 million back then, you're going to have made a lot more in today's dollars using similar value systems. And so when you take that into account, not only do the budgets make you have to scratch your head over did it really only cost $180 million to make? But let's just look at the opening day numbers here. So when you adjust for inflation, the rough estimate here of total box office opening weekend only, right? The domestic opening weekend for the first Avenger for 2011, $93 million, right? The 2011 number was $65 million in today's dollars. That'd be worth around $93 million. Winter Soldier, that was the one that was being compared to in many cases. And also remember, these are the 3-day totals. So some of the numbers that they were giving us were actually the 4-day estimates for Brave New World, and they were trying to put those 4-day numbers up against the 3-day totals of the previous films. Again, nothing shady about that whatsoever. Nothing nefarious about that whatsoever. Those media people can clearly be trusted every step of the way. But in the adjusted numbers there for Winter Soldier 2014, $128 million, $95 million unadjusted. The fact is, Brave New World was not even able to beat the unadjusted numbers against that of Winter Soldier. But remembering $128 million is likely the value in today's dollars, makes it that much more. Makes it that much worse. Now, no one had been mentioning Civil War because why would they want to do that, right? That film clearly had a lot more money, even, again, just back in 2016. This would have been $179 million unadjusted, $238 million when you do adjust. $88.5 million, though, is the total domestic right now estimated for the 3 days of Brave New World. Now, if you get kind of triggered by that, some people do, some people don't like when I bring up, anything to do with actual inflation. They just think it's, that we need to do more with this, and it's just not fair to say that because it doesn't take away how much money is being made by these movies. Okay, well, let's just talk about total people going to see the movie domestically. So if you then compare the fact that, guess what? Ticket prices have changed quite a bit over time, and obviously these are going to be impacted by this. If you go to that metric, then guess what? The first Avenger had about 8.2 million tickets sold domestically, based off of the numbers that were reported and based off of the average ticket price back at that time. Also keep in mind, back in 2011, that's when your first showings on Thursday were typically midnight showings. So if you were going to see this film opening day, you were usually going there around midnight or maybe, as late as 3 a.m. Working in a theater for many years, whenever we had to add showings, we either would add it to the other theaters we had available for more midnight showings, or we would actually have to push further release dates and further release times back and have 3 a.m. showings open up or other times in between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. as other theaters started to open, if other films and other showings of the movie were starting to let out. So that's also a metric here you have to keep in mind, really going up until Civil War, when that was still a very common occurrence. Maybe at that time, by 2016 or so, you might have had some films start to go upwards maybe to 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. showings, but that's very different than the 2 p.m. showings. That's right, 2 p.m. showings for Brave New World, and it still had 2 million less tickets than the first Avenger. One of the very first of the MCU movies, right? This is one of the starting blocks, one of the building blocks for what eventually became the massive Avengers film and the massive decade or so of films that all just did crazy box office numbers, crazy returns on investments there. Compare this, though, to 11.6 million tickets sold for Winter Soldier. Remember, that film was being compared at one point to these numbers here. Civil War, of course, 20.7 million, the clear winner of those three. But yeah, Brave New World, based off of how today current ticket price is around $14 on average, we know that most of the tickets being sold for this movie are going to be either 3D, IMAX, or some premium formatted screen. So 14, I think, is being quite generous here. 6.3 million tickets is our estimate for this instance, though. So 2 million less tickets than even that of the first Avenger. So clearly this film, just looking at it from a Captain America standpoint, is the worst performing on record. Right, the worst performing Captain Marvel opening. Sorry, Captain Marvel might as well be Captain America opening in the franchise's history. Now, the other comparison that is important to bring up is that of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Mania. It had the same exact weekend, right? Talking President's Day weekend release, so it had the same, you could argue, those 4-day numbers there. But what's interesting is that they claim that Ant-Man and the Wasp only cost around $200 million. But that also is a number that we know is actually not correct, thanks to the work of Caroline Reed over at Forbes and many other great persons who are uncovering the data and information. That number was a complete lie. Basically, that was a number put out likely by members of Disney's team. They put those numbers out to the trades as far as the estimates are concerned because they think they can get away with it and all that stuff. The issue is that they made Quantumania and many of their other films in the United Kingdom, where in order to get that massive tax rebate, you have to make your numbers publicly available, and it's actually easier to find for journalists across the world. And so Caroline Reed has done a great job of every time these tax returns get released of any project that they shot in the United Kingdom to get released. Guess what? Ant-Man and the Wasp actually cost $330 million, and that's after the tax incentives. Yeah, that's about a $130 million difference. So for those people who are buying into this $180 million production budget, when if you look back just to the last several MCU movie releases, every single one of them has had an additional at least $100 million added on to its cost versus the so-called projected total budget. To believe that this only cost $180 million, you are a fool to think that. If you honestly believe that, you have not been paying attention and you don't know what you're talking about. And if you cover box office as a profession, you should probably think about retiring at this point in time. But 180 million is, again, the number that they are lying about. But let's just go ahead and say, all right, let's just look at the numbers, though, as far as their total box office take is concerned. The first 3 days, all right, 88.5 million is our new metric now for Captain America Brave New World. That is nothing compared to the 106 million made by Quantumania. Quantumania was a mess. This film also poorly received from critics and also had a very similar audience reaction, at least when you look at the box office shills over on Rotten Tomatoes, right? Those numbers really in any way can't be trusted all that much. But guess what? Very similar fan reactions there. I do think that you did have a very bad word of mouth campaign on Quantumania, which is why you had a massive drop off in its second weekend of release. And if we're seeing similar numbers here and a similar word of mouth, and one could maybe even argue a worse word of mouth for this movie, do expect it to have a similar drop off in that 65+% range, right? That's very common for MCU films to drop 65% or so in their second weekend of release. Add on top of that, all we know about this being the lowest ranked and the lowest scored, quote, cinema score movie of all time as far as the MCU is concerned. Yeah, y'all know I don't care much for cinema score, but if even they say it is the worst as far as their rating system is concerned, it does not bode well for their chances down the line. Never say never, but 88.5 million versus 106 million is quite a disparity. Okay, we're obviously got to wait for those Monday numbers there, but based off of how this film is currently tracking up against Quantumania, there's a good chance that this film's not going to get to the 14 million that was made by Quantumania in its Monday numbers there, which means that this edge is probably going to stick, and there's a good chance that Brave New World does not break $100 million when it comes to this Monday. Again, obviously, it still could barely break $100 million, but we're still talking about a massive difference between these two movies. And if we go on to look to see the fact that globally speaking, Quantumania actually made a lot more money also internationally. $180 million is what currently Brave New World stands at. If you go back in time to Quantumania, that film had over $200+ million in overall box office globally. So how this film is tracking right now up against another film from around the same time of year, and again, a quote similar budget, it does start to make you wonder, are we seeing a repeat of this? And this film only got to $463 million worldwide. And if this movie, even if you believe the 180 million, if it does only get to this amount, guess what? Massive danger for this film's prospects. But we'll go further into that in just a little bit. Paddington Peru, again, a film I really want to see, and I love the Paddington franchise. $13 million there. Heart Eyes, the number 3 film at $10 million. So this actually went up 20%. So I wanted to mention that because that is a huge move for them to be able to increase in their second weekend of release. So bodes well for their future. Dogman at 30% of a drop off there. So still hanging around, but also losing some screeters there. And then we also have Nija 2. I think I am pronouncing that correct, maybe. But this is the film from China that supposedly made $1 billion in China. You all know I don't really buy or believe or agree with a lot of the things that come out of China. And so take it with a grain of salt. The fact that it is a China release, though, getting 660 screens and making $11,000 per screen is still pretty impressive. Going into the worldwide numbers here, $180 million right now for Captain America Brave New World. This did get a China release, by the way. We're still waiting on official numbers here, but according to some reports, around $6 million is what the film actually had in its opening. So not looking like it's going to have a strong start there or making a lot of money there, which is both a good and bad thing because of how much you get in return on your investment internationally. Paddington in Peru, massive difference here between domestic and international. That seems kind of to be the case where this film does very well in places like the UK and in international markets, and it does okay domestically. I would say right now this movie is doing okay. We'll have a fuller breakdown of this film and where it compares to the other films in the franchise tomorrow on the live stream. Love Hurts, $13 million. Heart Eyes, $21 million. Again, look at that massive increase compared to last weekend, so doing very well. Dogman, not doing very well, below the standard for its opening. This film looked like it had some potential, looked like that potential has pretty much all but disappeared. Now let's go over to the charts because we love charts on OMB Reviews, and let's first start off by talking about Captain America Brave New World, okay? So with $180 million, okay, most films, on average, are able to triple their global box office by the end of their run. So that means, on average, when it comes to where is your opening weekend versus where is your final results, Normally about ×3 is what you normally can get on average, right? So the average movie, if it has an average performance, an average run, then that would mean that at $180 million, the film would cap out somewhere around $542 million. Now, if we see a massive 60+% drop off next weekend, which historically seems like we're very likely to get that number, then this number will obviously be a lot smaller and a lot less of a case of actually, of this actually happening. And so I would say right now, 542 is probably a high end point. We'll see how it does during the week. We'll see how it does on Monday. These numbers can obviously change, but as of right now, not looking that great, even on an average performance run. The reason why is because even if you buy into the 180 million, and let's be honest, I think even if you bought that number, you would say, okay, maybe closer to $200 million is the actual cost. If you even buy that number, which is still off quite a bit, you're still talking about a break-even point of 500 million using an older metric. That's back in the day before COVID. That's back in the day before internationals were as high as they are. For a movie like this, which will likely have a much higher international yield in many markets in many ways, we're talking about it probably being closer to 3 times its budget for its break-even point, which means what? $600+ million is what the film would have to make on that lower estimated budget. So even on the lower estimated budget, guess what? You're still not making your money back, and I don't know what else to tell you at this point in time. Now, of course, we know, based off of the reporting from World of Real and other just using common sense solutions and common sense understandings, that this film probably costs closer to $300 million at least. I know that the numbers are out there that show $350+ million, so 350 to 375 is what World of Real have said. We know others who have said it may have even ballooned upwards to $400 million. Let's just look at the history of this. Remember, even Quantumania, they claimed $200 million was the estimated budget. When the actual tax returns in the United Kingdom came out, we were able to find out that film actually had a net cost of $330 million. That's an extra $130 million tapped on top of that. You look to any other film from Marvel, filmed in the United Kingdom, you find very similar numbers where it's at least $100 million more versus the initial estimated cost. Keeping this in mind, and also keeping in mind that this movie, Brave New World, was not shot in the UK, so we're not going to find out the truth on this one. So that's why it's also easy for them to run with this $180 million number, because they have enough people in the shill media that can cover for them, because guess what? They're never going to have to worry about the truth coming out, the information coming out from the United Kingdom, since they have no tax returns that have to worry about coming out from those locations, since they did not film in the United Kingdom. Because of that, again, do expect a lot of chicanery in the news media and the coverage, and I'm sure there will be some lovely Marvel Disney shills in the comment section going after this as well. But even with that being the case, $300 million on a lower end of the likely $350+ million budget, yeah, $750 million, which means in reality, we're talking $850 to $1 billion for your break even. If you're going to be generous with the amount of money that this needs to make up. Remember, marketing cost is not included in these production budgets. So assuming at least a $300 million budget, you're talking about probably closer to $150 million in actual marketing spend, which is why $750 to $850 is a likely break-even point for the film. $8.9 million is what it actually has made so far in China. $365 million in losses as of right now, based off of a $200 million budget. This film is in trouble, no matter how you spin it. The question is just going to really be, how much money does this lose, not if it'll lose money. Unless there's some massive change that happens, unless there is this massive groundswell of weekly support, right, in the domestic box office, we're not likely going to see this film get anywhere close, even using that lower, completely made up metric of $180 million in budgeting for the film. So I did want to point that out there, because it is just insane. Not to mention, you have even normie review audiences like the people over on Criticlist. Shout out to Criticlist, not sponsored by them. I just really love their platform. 34% is the current rating, a bogus score, and there are a lot of normie audiences on this site. You're going to find some people who have most excellent reviews on this site. You're going to have people that have decent reviews. You're going to have people that have this listed at even a rad score, right? So you have these metrics going on, but still, the vast majority of people do not like this movie. 62%, 62 voters, bogus score, certified bogus over on there. Can't say that I'm all surprised by it. So whether it is the ticket sales within the Captain America franchise, whether you're comparing this film to a film like, Quantumania, this movie is just not doing well. And so I can't wait to see how the media will run with this, what kind of nonsense they will make up, because oh boy, they're going to continue to dig holes for themselves that they're not going to be able to get out of. And we'll have a full update on this tomorrow on the stream, 7:45 p.m. Eastern Time, the Welcome to Asgard podcast stream here on this channel. And if you want to see that and plenty of more, make sure that you subscribe, hit that bell. That way you get notified every time a new video comes out. We do still have our ballot open for the Raven Awards, the 2025 Raven Awards, where we award the best and worst movies from the year 2024. Check out ombreviews.com to find more information on the ballot there. It is still open, and it will be open for all of February. You guys are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. That's going to be it for me. Let me know in the comment section whether you saw Captain America. Do you think it's good? How much money do you think it's going to lose? How much do you think the film actually cost? And also for Petting into Peru, have you seen that one? I actually really want to see it. I really do enjoy the first two films. My son especially likes the first two movies quite a bit. Hoping that it has that same kind of magic to it, but we'll have to wait and find out all about that, of course. You guys are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed feast of Septuagesima, the beginning of our Lenten conditioning, getting ready for the great season of Lent in 3 weeks. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribe Star people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And also to the K-Man. Check out his website, xtheboundaries.co. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.